Welcome, everybody, to this night's edition of PFN Weekly. I am your host, Brett Yaris, and as it says on the display, I'm just here so I don't get fined. I am going to be joined this week by my co-host, as I am every week, my good friend, Cody Rourke. Cody is the NFL insider for the Locked On Sports Network. What's up, Cody?
Hey, Brett, very happy to be here. I know we're usually going on Tuesdays. It's been a crazy week around the NFL, my friend, but very happy to be here today with you.
I'm always thrilled to have you. It's always a good time. You'll notice this week with us is not Benjamin Albright due to some scheduling stuff. Ben and I hope you didn't miss it. Ben and I did our League Rumblings segment last night in our normal time slot. Make sure you go back and look for that on Twitter. But tonight, Cody, we are joined, I'm very happy to say this, we are joined by the great Mark Schofield. Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Although if you're asking me to fill Ben's shoes, I'm not so sure I can do that, particularly because I don't have a fuchsia sports coat. Ben has a fuchsia sports coat, which to his everlasting credit, he wore out to the bars in Mobile one year.
Yeah.
And I got to tip the hat to that. But I can't fill Ben's shoes. I'll try to do my best, but it's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight, guys.
Ben says that we are behind in fashion in comparison. Like he's years ahead, and apparently we haven't caught up yet.
Cody, he's light years ahead. Like sometimes I'll see what he's wearing, and I'm just like, yeah, God bless you, Ben. God bless you. I could not do that.
We're all wearing clothes in 2021, and Ben is chilling in 3021. So
he's like out of Cyberpunk 2077. I don't know if there's anybody that's bought Cyberpunk. I have. It's glitchy as all get out. But there are some outfits on that game where I'm like, yeah, I can see Ben wearing that.
Totally. I think Brett froze here, but Mark. Very happy to have you here on PFN Weekly here today. Obviously, you do a lot of phenomenal work. You study the quarterback position very detailed. You put up some film reviews. You ruffle some feathers of some fan bases because when you go through the film, you tell them, things that they like to hear, but you also tell them the things that they don't want to hear about their favorite team's quarterback. And tell you what, it's grown a little bit, even more so. You've done phenomenal work. Obviously, I have some familiarity working with you over at the Locked On Podcast Network, and you do phenomenal coverage there. But, on today's show, one of the things we're going to get into is a discussion really related to some of the younger quarterbacks right now in the National Football League. We look at the AFC, we look at Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes. We look at the NFC side of things as well. There's a ton of talent at the quarterback position. But first off, kind of want to get things started off with, your thoughts really on the overall trajectory of some of these young quarterbacks before we get into some of those specific names right now in the NFL, because now we're seeing Drew Brees on his way out, Phillip Rivers potentially on his way out, Aaron Rodgers still willing and dealing at his age. But the era of those quarterbacks that we grew up watching in a sense, and probably in our mid years as well, now we're starting to see the younger generation start to take over. Obviously, what's your quick overview really on the young generation of quarterback play that we have now in the National Football League?
Well, I think if you're a fan of this game, if you're a fan of the quarterback position, offense in general, you have to be excited about what we're going to see this weekend in the AFC and what we have the potential to see in the years to come in the AFC. Because, look, you've got Mahomes, you've got Baker Mayfield, you've got Josh Allen, you've got Lamar Jackson, 3 guys from the 2018 class, 1 guy from the 2017 class. But then if you expand it a bit to teams that didn't make the playoffs, Deshaun Watson, obviously, you've got some potential with Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. Like the AFC seems to be that class of like up and coming young arms that have such talent. And I'm so excited to see them grow and develop at the position. Because like you said, you flip, to the NFC, you've got Brady and Brees, guys that this might be their last ride. Aaron Rodgers, he's playing at such a high level right now, but near the end, the back half of his career, we could say, who knows what we're going to see from the Rams, whether it's Goff, whether it's, John Wolford, but these young arms in the AFC, there's such talent with these guys. They're changing the way the game is played. They're changing the way we're evaluating the position, particularly with Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. So it's going to be an exciting weekend. It's going to be an exciting next couple of years with these guys as they all sort of grow and develop in the National Football League.
You know, it really is. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about as well is when we look at the evolution of the quarterback position, I mean, I even think maybe even dating back 5 years ago, it was not anywhere close to what it is now. How has the position really changed? I know, you know, as you get younger, you get more innovative. College offenses and schemes are really just, they're changing to incorporate a lot of empty and a lot of spread and a lot of just run and gun. How has that impacted the NFL and maybe the future of the quarterback position?
Well, I think you're seeing, Cody, sort of a premium on athleticism and mobility at the position because, you know, what we're seeing infiltrated to the National Football League are some of these spread and RPO type designs where you want that athleticism of the quarterback. You want the ability to play 11 on 11 in the run game, you know, and you need quarterbacks that can execute that part of the game plan. But what you're also getting is guys that have coached that, whether it's at high school, whether it's colleges, they're moving their way up into the National Football League. And even some of the, quote, pro-style offenses, whether it's the McVay, Shanahan tree or others, you know, those offenses still need mobility at the quarterback position. You know, when you're running that outside zone boot action stuff, you need that mobility, you need that athleticism. So it's changed what teams are asking quarterbacks to do. And as such, it's changing how we have to evaluate the next draft class. When you're looking at the next group, whether it's Lawrence, Lance, Fields, Wilson, you want that athletic ability because those guys are going to have opportunities to step into these kinds of offenses. They're going to go to coaches that want to call those kinds of plays, and they need to have that box. And so it allows you to also get these guys on the field quickly. You know, the days of the 3-year window here, hold a clipboard, watch the starter do it, you'll take over eventually, that's gone. Like if you're sitting a guy, you're wasting those early years when he's on the rookie deal. So you want to get him on the field quickly. So you have to run the offensive designs that they're familiar with. And so athleticism, mobility, the ability to create outside of structure, outside of the pocket, it's critical now for young QBs.
I love it. You know, it's crazy to see Aaron Rodgers at his age still being able to do the things as mobile as he can. I mean, especially throwing on the run, that's one of his best attributes. And we're starting to see that from these younger guys, which makes you wonder if the game keeps changing. And even the addition of a 17th regular season game, I imagine some of these quarterback records, we've grown accustomed to seeing it, you know, in a very traditional style of the NFL where defense was very dominant for a multitude of years. It's going to be scary to see what the numbers are going to be like in the next 10 years. So obviously appreciate your insight there on the future of the quarterback position.
Yeah. I mean, we might see a 6,000 yard passer, 60 touchdowns in a season. I mean, we could see numbers like that. And it's crazy to think about. I mean, I remember when I was younger, man, you hit 25 touchdown passes in a season. You were slitting it, man. Yeah. Now you're like, you're average at best if you're hitting 25.
So wild how it goes there, you know, and I think one of the first quarterbacks we're actually going to bring up here today is actually one of the guys that really came onto the scene in the National Football League. He lit the world on fire with his athletic ability and all the weapons around him, and that is going to be Patrick Mahomes of the Kansas City Chiefs. And Brett, I'm going to let you take this one away, my man.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, sorry for those technical difficulties, but we bring up a quarterback, Mark, you know, who goes right to the heart of what you're talking about when we talk about the future of the quarterback position in the league. We think of Dan Marino's 1984 season, right? The touchdowns, the yardage record. And you look at all these quarterbacks, Brees, Brady, even Mahomes, who are breaking these records, and you see Marino's name constantly there. I think what we're seeing in Patrick Mahomes, Mark, is this era is Marino. For as far as the quarterback position has come in this new era, Mahomes is doing things even above and beyond that. Tell me, do you see that same thing? And what is it about him that allows him to just go into that upper echelon?
Absolutely. And I think it's a combination of a couple of things with Mahomes. It's, you know, the arm talent, obviously, you know, nobody's going to question Patrick Mahomes from an arm talent perspective and what he can do in terms of throwing a football. There's the athleticism as well. And there's that confidence in himself, that supreme confidence that, you know, you saw at Texas Tech, but people were worried, well, that's really not going to translate. He's going to make too many mistakes. He's going to throw too many interceptions, which is why it's so ideal that he ended up in a place under Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy where they're going to let him challenge throwing windows. They're going to let him take risks with the football. You know, if he decides, look, I'm going to take a deep shot here, even though I should probably throw the check down, they're going to be okay with it because they trust that he's not going to make the kind of mistakes we thought he was going to make coming out. And so, you know, I think he's certainly broken the mold in terms of how we think about the quarterback position generally, how we evaluate the quarterback position. You know, one of the knocks on him coming out was, air raid quarterback. These guys don't amount to much. You know, he's opened doors for other air raid quarterbacks to now burst through. guys like Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, like guys coming from that offense where you're thinking, oh, the footwork isn't there. They're not technically sound. They're not making progression reads. No, we need to rethink how we view quarterbacks from that kind of offensive school of thought. And so, he's been at the vanguard, I think, of how we view the quarterback position, how we're changing in terms of evaluating the position. But look, when I get to turn on the film Monday mornings, I get lucky to watch Patrick Mahomes play this position. And it's different. It's new. It's changed how we think about offenses, but it's changed those things all for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you bring up a really fascinating part about Patrick Mahomes sort of serving as the gateway, right, to these younger quarterbacks. I mean, his old Texas Tech coach and Cliff Kingsbury goes and takes Kyler Murray when he gets to Arizona, number 1 overall. And you have to wonder what the influence of not just coaching Mahomes in college, but then seeing what he was able to do in his first 2 years as a pro, led to that decision. So absolutely. And Cody, I would love for you to jump in on this too, but it's hard to ask this question, but he's still so young, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Where do you see the need for improvement with Patrick Mahomes that might help the Chiefs in this postseason be the first team since the 03-04 Patriots, a team well, Mark, be the first to repeat as Super Bowl champs?
I mean, look, Patrick Mahomes should not be taking advice from me. And there are few, if any, weaknesses to his game. I mean, one area where you do see show up on film where he does get into a bit of a trouble is, there are times when he either bails from clean pockets or simply just retreats deep into pockets, almost outside of that cone of protection that you get from the structure of the pocket. When you're an offensive line coach, when you're a left tackle, and you've got, a 5-step gun drop concept or a 7-step drop from under center concept, where that quarterback's supposed to be. If he suddenly just retreats 15 yards into the pocket deep, you can't protect him, because he's basically rutted himself into pressure. And that's something to watch this weekend. Look, if the Cleveland Browns are going to pull off an upset, they're going to need to get pressure on him. His numbers this year have been still above average to good under pressure, but a step back from him when he's in clean pockets. You've got Myles Garrett that can obviously get after the passer a bit. And so, he's going to have to, I think, stay in the integrity of the pocket as much as he can. But it's a real nitpicky thing, because if you think about sometimes when he's done that, take, for example, a throw he made against Baltimore earlier in the season when he drops 18, 19 yards deep in the pocket, then just uncorks a 70-yarder on the money for touchdown. It's like, well, okay, if he's going to be able to do that, we'll live with it, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's a nitpicky thing. There are times when it comes up. But the thing with playing the Chiefs is you can get him on one or two of those a game, but they can still score so quickly that he'll be able to turn right around and drop a touchdown on your head. So, yeah.
I will tell you, and Cody, I'm sorry that I'm hogging the screen time here, but Mark brought up something that Cody, you and I and Ben talked about as early as our first show of the season, right? When Mark talks about pocket integrity. It's not something that a lot of people talk about. And we highlighted 2 quarterbacks, right, who often drop back beyond that 7.5, 8-yard mark in their drop back. And we said it was Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. And Cody, you know this, Mark, I'm not sure if you do, but what I do away from PFN is I actually work on technique with NFL players. And one of the players that I work with is Chiefs rookie offensive tackle Lucas Niang, who opted out this season due to COVID. And so I've been working with him this whole time. And you can see a lot of that work, by the way, when you go to our YouTube channel at Pro Football Network and click on the behavior movement, and you'll see all of my work with Lucas there. But this is something we work on, and it's exactly what Mark just said, Cody, which is we know Patrick Mahomes is a bit of a drifter. He's a bit of a drifter, and so that goes into how I work with the offensive tackles who are going to play on the Chiefs. And so, Cody, talk a little bit about that aspect there.
Well, I think Patrick Mahomes, his physical traits, and, he's a very smart football player, by the way, as well. I mean, he can diagnose a lot of things, but his physical traits, he gets away with a lot of things that most coaches in the NFL would say, hey, don't do that. Don't throw across your body, right? But he's got the big arm. He's got the athleticism to escape pressure, and he's got all the talent in the world around him. I think that's also another benefit to seeing what he could do. And, Ben was even on the show talking about how, he could elevate the New York Jets probably to 10 wins. They probably could have won 10 games this season if they had a guy like that.
Yes. This exact Jets roster with Patrick Mahomes could be a double-digit win team.
He makes everybody around him better. You know, like I said, some of the things with his average depth on his dropbacks when it gets to about 9 yards or 10 yards, you can almost anticipate. And I think Miami did a really good job, actually, because he did this on one play. He tried to reverse pivot back to the left side, and it wasn't there. He tried to do it back to the right side, back to the left side. He lost 30 yards on the play, got sacked for a massive gain. So there's things in his game where I think NFL defenses are trying to adjust, and we talk about it. If you give him 90 yards to throw the football, he's going to make some big plays. However, if you compress that field, the Chiefs this year have been very inconsistent in the red zone. They get a little too cute with some of their play calls, but when you can compress the field and not allow those guys to get free vertically like Tyreek Hill or even Sammy Watkins, McCole Hardman, then you can have an opportunity to maybe get some stops, hold those touchdowns to field goals. And we saw Denver do that in that one Sunday Night Football matchup a little bit later on in the season against Kansas City. So the playoffs are a lot different, but I tell you this, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you cannot afford to get in a shootout with Patrick Mahomes. I don't care if you just scored 48 points against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Chiefs are a far better football team, I think, defensively right now than what we saw the Steelers. I don't know what happened there, but you cannot afford that luxury. If you do, we might see the same exact kind of score or statistical production that we saw when Oklahoma played Texas Tech. That's been the talk this week on social media.
Yeah, and Mark, you know, we've said all these traits about Patrick Mahomes: big arm, can throw across his body, athletic, get outside the pocket and make plays. And that's the perfect segue to the next quarterback that I want to talk with you about as we talk about this youth movement in the AFC, right? Every remaining quarterback in the AFC is age 25 or younger. And that brings us to the next player that has a lot of similarity, I think, to Patrick Mahomes in the style of play, and that's Josh Allen. Josh Allen, the big player, the big bodied quarterback out of Wyoming. Mark, I will be the first to admit, okay, we have a big thing on this show with Ben, myself, and Cody, where we'll tell you when we screw something up. I was dead wrong on this kid. I was down on him coming out of college. I believe that accuracy was not a thing that you could teach. He was one of the only quarterbacks to come out in recent memory with a completion percentage under 60% in college. I didn't see it last year. I wasn't a believer in him, Mark, in the first half of the season, but boy, has he really turned it on. Although I hear that you did a video on YouTube where you saw some stuff that perhaps may lead to his downfall in the postseason. Give me your take on Josh Allen.
Yeah, and Brett, you weren't alone in terms of, you know, sort of having some, you know, skepticism about Josh Allen coming out. I mean, he was my QB5 that draft. I have Josh Rosen 1, Josh Allen QB5. So you want to talk about taking some L's? I'm taking some L's from that draft class. The thing about Allen that has been incredible is anytime you as a quarterback, particularly a young quarterback, can adjust to the adjustments and come out better on the other side, that tells you that you've done work and that Brian Dable, your offensive coordinator, has done work too, because early in the year, he was picking apart man coverage, and he was great this year against man coverage, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But there was a stretch in the middle of the season where you had games against Denver earlier in the year. You had a game against the Titans, that game against it was a game against, I think, the Steelers, where he saw a bit more zone coverage. Chiefs too. He saw a bit more zone coverage, and he sort of struggled against it. He struggled to challenge some zone windows underneath. He struggled to challenge some zone coverage rotations, but he figured it out. He figured it out in games later in the year against the Patriots of Week 16, that game against the Steelers. He picked zone coverage apart down the stretch, and that's such a huge thing for him. That's a sign that the game has slowed down for him, that he's making anticipation throws. You know, in doing that video for YouTube as part of the preview stuff that Doug Farrar and I are doing for USA Today's Touchdown Wire, I saw some instances this year where some mug looks, some pressure looks kind of confused him a bit. There were a couple of plays, even the Indianapolis Colts did it early, where you know, they would show him that mug look, but the two linebackers walked up either in the A gaps or the B gaps and then drop to take away his hot read or take away where he thought he could go with the football. And that got him to sort of rethink what he had to do on that given play. It's a small, narrow thing. But when you're talking about going up against these Bills, the way they're playing right now, small, narrow things might be your only shot, because this is a team that's rolling, and it starts with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and you bring up the game against the Colts last week. I do work with a couple Colts players as well, and I can tell you that one of the things that stuck out to me in that game was that the Colts were not getting any type of pressure on Josh Allen from the edge. Right. And when the edge players did get there, it was because the coverage had locked down the receivers for about 3.5 seconds, and the edges were finally able to get there. But they allowed Josh Allen to have sort of that clean pocket that really let him feel comfortable getting a rhythm. And it sounds like, Mark, what you're saying is when he is able to get comfortable, everything continues to slow down. And we've seen not just that in a game inside the game, we've seen that over the course of this season. He's not comfortable as the season has gone on. Cody, I talked so preseason, Benjamin Albright, our third co-host of the show, predicted that it was going to be the Chiefs and the Bills in the AFC Championship game. And I hammered him for that take. I thought he was crazy. But Cody, I'm taking the L on it. Well, not that they've gotten that far yet, but what does Josh Allen need to do to ensure that prediction comes true against the Ravens this week?
Well, I don't think it's a lot about as to what Josh Allen has to do. I think it has to be what can the Bills do around him. Look, I think the lack of a running game by Buffalo. Look, your entire offense can't just be Josh Allen as a rusher, Josh Allen as a passer. And that's something that we saw against the Indianapolis Colts. He led the team in rushing, and he also led the team in passing. And, he accounted for 3 total touchdowns, obviously 1 on the ground, 2 in the air. One of those was a crazy quarterback design. It wasn't there. The gap wasn't there. A close down. He just tossed it up to the open man. He's a smart quarterback. He's evolved. And I think that really for Josh Allen, he's probably the most improved player in the National Football League this year. And nobody saw this type of trajectory coming. We knew he had the physical tools and the traits, but I think if a team like Buffalo is going to if they're going to go through and they're going to beat a team like Baltimore, who's got a very strong and talented defense that held Derrick Henry, the NFL's leading rusher, to under 55 total yards altogether, they shut it down. Look, he's going to have it's going to be tough. Stephon Diggs has been on the injury report this week. Same thing with Cole Beasley. We know that he was fighting through that last week. Stephon Diggs has an oblique injury right now that he's dealing with. He's going to play in this game, but the biggest concern to me is not what they can do in the passing game. I think they can absolutely take some shots and connect in coverage. I thought we saw that happen with Ryan Tannehill on a couple plays as well. Right. Now it's all about what can you do to offset the pressure and having him have to throw the game, right? Instead of you got to get the run game going somehow. Zack Moss obviously is out for the time being. Obviously, a big injury to him. Obviously, our thoughts and well wishes go out to him in his recovery, but it's the playoffs. You're gonna have to find a way to run the ball. If you can't run the ball, this is where teams lose in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. And that's sort of, and we'll get to this in our fourth quarterback that we're going to look at in this youth movement among AFC quarterbacks. But we talk about what sustainably works in the playoffs. And historically, it's been the quarterbacks who are able to pass the ball against a better defense. So I know that sounds super simple. But when you're to this point in the playoffs, you're in the Elite Eight right now, essentially in the NFL. So you're going against the top defenses, presumably, who make it in there. And we'll get to this when we talk about some of the other quarterbacks, but I thought we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson in a bit, but I would have put Josh Allen in Lamar Jackson's company, and I need to see both of them pass the ball well and consistently to make it through this postseason. Josh Allen looked good this past week against, a good Tampa 2 style defense with Matt Eberflus in the Colts. Let's see if he can do it against the Ravens, but let's move on from one quarterback of a team that hasn't won a playoff game until last week for 2 decades to another quarterback of a team that I think the fan base had just become so perpetually frightened that when they were up 28-0 in the first quarter, Mark, there's no chance Browns fans felt that they were going to be safe. And we have Trey Wingo, who's watching the show tonight, and he jumped in here with a comment. Trey tells us everything the Chiefs do well is something the Browns do poorly. Mark, what does Baker Mayfield need to do to reverse that mindset?
Well, I think the lesson from the Cleveland Browns this season, from Baker Mayfield this season, is that scheme fit matters so much for a young quarterback. When you look at Kevin Stefanski's offense, it's sort of a branch off that Shanahan-McVay system where outside zone, boot action, play action off of that, put your quarterback in a position to be successful. They've done that so well with Mayfield this season. They've done such a great job of throwing out heavier personnel, 12, 13 personnel looks. Some of their big shot plays downfield, that Titans game earlier this year, the big shot to Donovan Peoples-Jones, that was out of a 13 personnel, 3 tight end look. They've put Mayfield in that position where he's thrown against heavier defensive packages, base personnel packages on the defensive side of the ball. He's taking care of the football. He's not turning it over. They're relying a bit on the run game as well. Obviously, when you've got Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, that's a pretty good package to rely on when you talk about running the football. And so I've been very impressed with what Mayfield's done this year, what Stefanski has done for him. And I think to take a step back and look at both Mayfield and the quarterback we just talked about, Josh Allen, these are lessons in patience for other teams. If you have a younger quarterback that, maybe you're not seeing develop as quickly as you'd like, whether it's a Daniel Jones or a Sam Darnold or some of these other young quarterbacks in the NFL, look at these two teams. Another example with Tua, right? With all these rumors, Miami should draft a QB at 3 and give up on a guy after half a season of football. Look at these two teams that are now in, like you said, the Elite Eight, Brett. They've shown patience with these young guys, and that patience is being rewarded. And so patience, scheme fit, landing spot, they matter so much. I've been very impressed with Baker and Kevin Stefanski's offense this season.
Yeah, Mark, you talk about scheme fit, you talk about Kevin Stefanski. One thing we talk a lot about on this show on PFN Weekly is the importance of environment. By trade, I'm a behavior analyst, and one of the things I study when I look at behavior is the impact that environment has on how we behave. In the case of athletes that I work with, it's how they perform, right? Performance behavior and the role that environment plays in that. And Kevin Stefanski coming out of that, and you mentioned the Mike Shanahan tree, really, that QB collective, right? Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur, Kevin Stefanski. Oh, by the way, 3 of them are in the Elite Eight. The last 2 NFC Super Bowl representatives are the QB collective coaches, Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan. And here's Kevin Stefanski leading this Cleveland Browns, although he was in his basement last week. Right. But, to your point, the impact that Kevin Stefanski manipulating that environment with his scheme and how quarterback centric it is seems to really have done really good work for Baker Mayfield, helping him look like a former number 1 overall pick. Cody, what do you see from a defensive perspective, a team you're familiar with as you do so much work for with the Broncos in their division rival in the Chiefs? What do the Chiefs have to do defensively to limit what Baker Mayfield does through the air?
I think Steve Spagnuolo is going to try to put together a very, very impressive game plan this week. You've had a lot of time to prepare, and I think part of me too, looking at this matchup is the first round bye Blues going to bite Kansas City? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but against a guy like Baker Mayfield, you mentioned a lot of that play action, that bootleg stuff. For me, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'm going to find a way to send pressure because we know he likes to fake the handoff to the left, roll out to the right. I'm trying to send pressure off the right side to him in his face, force him to get the ball out quickly. Well, how do you counteract that? Because then they're going to run the short stuff. They'll have a tight end. He's going to chip release to the flat. Well, you have another cover guy over there. You can do it out of a too high safety look, send a spine, and more likely it's going to either be Tyrann Mathieu there in this situation. I think in this situation, when you look at guys like Jarvis Landry, Hollywood Higgins, he's playing phenomenal as well. Baker's got some weapons. And they also have a strong run game too with Kareem Hunt and also Nick Chubb. I think they have to find balance. Now, if the Kansas City Chiefs are going to come out here, I think it's going to be getting some of those takeaways. We've seen Baker come out and try to be sometimes too aggressive with the football. Sometimes he's had a hard time holding on to the ball. If Kansas City can get some pressure, if they can sack him a few times, I think they can generate some strip sacks. But also, I think, clogging some of those passing windows. Tyrann Mathieu has played very good football this year on that back end of that secondary. He's been the key cog there. And they've also had improved play at the cornerback position. Obviously, no DeAndre Baker. Bashaud Breeland is going to be there. No DeAndre Baker, who they had acquired, obviously, after the whole debacle that he had in New York, suffered that broken leg. But I think that they match up well, and I think it's going to be a fun matchup, but it's really going to boil down to how many points can the Browns score.
Yeah, and you have to think that basically being up 14-0 early, right? First play of the game, you're coming onto the field with a touchdown. That helps a quarterback settle in. You got to wonder, does that confidence, and we know that Baker is certainly not short on confidence. Right. So we got to see if he can carry that over into next week, where maybe, you don't get the benefit of that defensive performance. And can he carry that offense? I think we've seen times where he can, and it's up to Kevin Stefanski to help him find that comfort. And as Mark pointed out, so wonderfully, is that's what Kevin's been able to basically do all season. So let's see if they can keep it going for another round. We'll see. But that's going to take us. And Mark, by the way, I know we're a little over here, man, but I really appreciate you being so gracious with your time.
Of course.
Us. I love having you. And we're coming up on that final quarterback as we talk about the final 4 quarterbacks in the AFC and this youth movement, where we're really seeing in real time, Mark, the passing of the torch. And we've talked about this new era of quarterback play where you have to be an athlete. And Cody and I, we're going to get into the 65 and over club when we talk about Brady and Brees a little bit later, break that game down. But in the meantime, there's maybe not a more polarizing quarterback left among these 4 in terms of how you feel about him than Lamar Jackson, the reigning MVP of the Baltimore Ravens. Mark, on this show, I've been pretty vocal. I know Ben feels the same way. Cody has hinted at this as well. We felt very strongly that Lamar Jackson should have been last year's Offensive Player of the Year. We felt that Russell Wilson maybe got robbed of an MVP. We look at Lamar Jackson this year, under 3,000 yards passing, under 30 touchdowns, passing through the air, that is. We saw last week a struggle to maybe pass the ball, and the big plays that were made for the Ravens offense were obviously his big runs, which is huge. The question I have is the style of play sustainable for winning in the NFL postseason? Mark, what are you seeing in relation to that?
Yeah, I think that's sort of the ultimate question, Brett. And, he did get that first playoff win. And I think perhaps more importantly for Lamar, they had a bit of a comeback win. Now, it was early, but they were down 10. But traditionally, the book on this Ravens team has been, look, you turn them into a one-dimensional drop-back passing team by getting a lead early, they're going to struggle. Well, they had a bit of a comeback against Tennessee. So I think that was good to see if you're a Ravens fan. The interesting thing about Lamar, when watching that game against the Titans, studying it again this week, that offense stresses you from a defensive perspective because you have to account for Lamar in the run game, all the counter bash stuff, the RPO stuff that they can do. You have to worry about the quarterback. You have to play, disciplined football up front. That puts stress on your safeties. When you have to get the safeties involved in run support, that opens you up to the play action passing game down the field. Baltimore had a little bit of success with it against Tennessee, but obviously more success with that throughout the season. And so that puts your safeties into a position where if you're asking them to be aggressive, flying downhill to stop the run, it opens up those shot plays over the top. The trouble this week is you've got 2 great safeties this week on Buffalo. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, perhaps the best safety tandem in the league in my mind. Those guys do it so well. I've seen them confuse Tom Brady and the Patriots for years, and I think it's great that they're getting some of the accolades that they deserve, those 2 guys. Those guys aren't going to get fooled a lot. Those guys aren't going to get confused by some of what Baltimore's doing offensively, both in the run and the pass game. And so while I think last week was great for Lamar Jackson, I think it was great to see him get that playoff win. I think it was great to see him get that comeback win. I think he is sort of in this group of elite young quarterbacks that are going to be, MVP type candidates year in and year out, playoff winners, Super Bowl winners for sure. This might be a matchup that sort of favors Buffalo, particularly, guys, if we get that snow game. Lamar has been saying, I haven't played in snow before. This might be a tough environment to have that first snow game.
Absolutely. And you got to wonder, Mark, what that does for him as a runner, right?
Yeah.
I think historically we look at snow games and that's where we see the rushing attack come through. But it's usually, I feel, and I could be wrong, but it's usually that power running game.
Right.
Do you think that limits Lamar as a scrambler if we see a snow game?
I mean, I think it will certainly, limit him somewhat. Not fully, because look, he's so talented, he's so quick, he's so elusive that he might still break off a couple of longer scrambles. But when you start thinking about all the concepts they use, where you've got that running back quarterback mesh in the backfield, where you're relying on quick change of directions type movements, which Lamar does, when you don't have your feet under you, when the footing is a bit slick, the ball's slick, you might have some, mistakes. You might have some miscues. You might have some missed opportunities where he tries to cut and go and, the feet go out from under him, because of the slick surface. So, he might have some runs in scramble drill mode as a result of the snow, but he also might limit a lot of what they do. It's going to be a lot of give and take. I think you might see Greg Roman call more gap and power stuff. Obviously, they've got both zone and gap power in the playbook. You might see a lot more quarterback power stuff. But yeah, it's going to be a question, which team sort of handles those elements better if we do indeed get that snow game on Saturday.
It will certainly be interesting. I mean, I think there's nothing quite like football on the snow, especially for
Playoff
us.
snowball. I mean, yeah, we love it.
Well, Mark, it's been truly a pleasure having you here, man. I hope we get a chance to do this again.
Absolutely.
Truly invaluable insight. If you're not doing so already, guys, you are missing out. Make sure you're following Mark on Twitter at Mark Schofield, and you're checking him out on YouTube. You mentioned what he's doing on YouTube with USA Today, Touchdown Wire. Make sure you're checking that out because you will be smarter for it. And that is what we're trying to do here, man, at PFN, is help you guys be smarter. And Mark is certainly a guy to help you do that. Mark, thanks a lot, brother. Hope we get to do this again.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much. This was a blast. Keep crushing it, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
man.
you, Mark.
See you guys.
I tell you what, Brett, I played in the snow a couple of times, and I can tell you it sucks. And the reason I say that is because what happens is it depends on how much snow is on the ground. Knowing Buffalo, knowing there could be potentially a lot of snow, what happens is, as a defensive back, one of the things too, for me is the snow, it clumps up underneath your cleats. Like it covers it. It almost serves as almost kind of like a slipper in a sense. And you have to literally stomp your feet every single time you step out on the field because you're trying to get those clumps off your cleats. You have no footing whatsoever. You have to adjust your cushion as a defensive back. It's not fun. I mean, it's fun playing. It's fun getting some tackles, but outside of that, it's a slip and slide. And, knowing me and my knee history, torn ACLs, man, playing in the snow is rough. But I think it does. If they do play in the snow, I think it actually favors the Ravens a lot more than it probably favors Buffalo, because I don't think Buffalo can go out and throw it. If you have, a foot of snow out there, they got to be able to run the ball, which they have not been able to do. And I think you look at a running offense like the Baltimore Ravens, they can do all that. So
I think you bring up a good I think you bring up a good point. First of all, playing in the snow is fun when you're 10 and you're with your friends in the neighborhood.
You're an adult.
When you're trying to make a couple $1 million and win a playoff game, it's not the greatest, especially when you're in Buffalo, as Matthew Kanata points out, is cold, dry, and in the middle of nowhere. It's actually in the middle of New York, to be clear. But yeah, I think Cody, that the game is a very interesting one as we start to break down the rest of the games this weekend, and we'll go through them pretty quickly here. But we talked a little bit about Lamar Jackson. We obviously covered Josh Allen. But for me, and I'd like us to go on the record here and pick a winner. Not that we're going to be held to it here, but I see the Bills coming out on top. At the risk of getting Josh Allen, which is what I'm calling it when I make a prediction about a quarterback that completely blows up in my face. I have also felt the same way about Lamar Jackson. I've been very consistent about it. I've actually found him through our offensive value metric at Pro Football Network to be one of the least valuable quarterbacks to their team as a passer, to be clear, as a passer. And I think in the playoffs, when you're going against these better defenses, you better be able to pass the ball. And if you're going to beat the Bills, and let's assume that it doesn't snow, you better be able to pass it because Josh Allen will. I don't think Lamar is able to do it. I didn't see it against Tennessee. I don't think we're going to see it against the Bills. I have the Bills winning this and advancing to the AFC Championship game. What say you, Cody?
Well, this is where I try to play at both sides, and I try to really think about who has the better advantage here. I think because of the fact that Buffalo struggles with running the football, that I think that this matchup, it typically is in favor of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, you mentioned some of those throws with Lamar Jackson. He threw one in that first quarter. It was a poorly placed ball, and it was intercepted. He had a couple of good ones. He had one to Hollywood Brown down the right side. I thought it was his best throw of the day. But against a team like Buffalo, who's going to have Tre'Davious White covering your team's best wide receiver, they're going to have to find a way to run the ball first, because once you can run the ball, and if you're effective at doing it, that defense, they're going to tighten up off the edge. They're going to tighten their linebackers up, and that's where you can hit some of that play action and the RPO stuff that we know that Lamar Jackson loves to hit. Yep. This is one of those games that could go either way. But look, I think that Baltimore, they're finally picking up some steam. I think this is a revenge tour for them. The way they were able to come out on top against Tennessee, I was really disappointed in Tennessee and Seattle last week. I thought they didn't show up. You're like they showed up. Yeah. And hats off to Baltimore. Not to discredit Baltimore, I think that Wink Martindale did a phenomenal job, composing a game plan that was going to focus on forcing Ryan Tannehill to beat you with his arm, because you stopped the number one key to their offense, and that's Derrick Henry. I also think it poses some questions to Tennessee in the future that we can have on the show. Is Mike Vrabel trying to do too much as the head coach? Does he need to delegate a little bit? There are some questions there, but I'm going to go with Baltimore in this one. You heard it here first. I think Baltimore is going to have success running the football. And I think in the opportunities he's going to get it, because you're going to get some through the air. I think Lamar Jackson is going to capitalize with a couple of big plays downfield.
All right, so I'm saying Buffalo. You are saying the Ravens. We'll see how it turns out. That's going to be the Saturday night game, 8:15.
Two weekends in a row, Saturday and Sunday football all day long. My wife's going to hate me.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't blame her, but at the same time, man, like, gotta do what you gotta do.
Hey, I made the couch move home the last 2 weeks. I have no complaints. I eat football. I'm in.
Well, that takes us to our next game, believe it or not, because and I'm pretty sure this game is being televised on the History Channel. Just playing off of Tom Brady's tweet there, where he had him and Drew Brees looking. Sorry, I have to put this on the screen, guys. Matt, our CEO, is apparently getting divorced. Matt, I'm pretty sure it has a lot more to do with you than it does football, but we'll see. We'll see how that. Good luck to you, buddy. But yeah, look, it's the battle of the seniors. I think both are in line to get vaccinated first from COVID because of their ages. But there is no doubt that Tom Brady has had a phenomenal season. Number 3 most valuable quarterback per offensive value metric over on PFN. Drew Brees, I think, has enough left in the tank with the weapons around him to give the Tampa Bay Buccaneers a struggle. And I'll tell you, Cody, what this game comes down to me, the Saints defense. The Saints defense has been elite all season. This is not the Washington football team that Tom Brady's going to go up against. Even though that seemed to be a bit of a struggle with Tyler Heineke there. But I see the Saints pulling this out. This goes to what I said preseason in our first episode of PFN Weekly to start the year. I had the Saints and the Packers in the the NFC Championship game, and I think that's how this goes. I think the Saints come out on top here and send Tom Brady home in his first season as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Cody, what say you?
I'm with you on that too, and we looked at those first couple of matchups. The first one was it was the first game of the season. Both teams are just trying to get a general feel for each other. The Saints, obviously a little bit more experience, more chemistry at that point. And then we saw in the second matchup, it wasn't even close. I mean, that Saints defense, they got after Tom Brady. They forced turnovers, and that offense was just absolutely rolling. I don't think anything's going to change here. I think that the New Orleans Saints are going to win pretty handily against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the reason I say that too, look, Tom Brady's got the weapons around him, no doubt about it. Mike Evans did a little bit of that TB12 routine and magically had his knee healed. I wonder who's, he sold someone's soul away for that. But the thing I look at is Michael Thomas is back. The biggest question is Latavius Murray going to be able to play? Obviously, I think Alvin Kamara being back last week was huge for them. But offensively, that was just kind of a tune-up. I didn't think that New Orleans was really as effective offensively as we know that they can be last week. And I feel like this week they're going to be more ready and they're going to have guys more acclimated to do so. Drew Brees is back, which is great news for them. I think that the Saints are going to, once again, I think they're going to beat Tampa Bay, and it's not going to be a close game. I think it's going to be probably a 2-score game altogether.
Yeah, I think we'd see Tom Brady lose to a team 3 times in a year for the first time in his career. And you know what might help Drew Brees get into a rhythm? Not putting Taysom Hill at quarterback. But
unless it's in the red zone, I think you can do that. But at midfield, no.
And Sean Payton, he still persists. So
I hope my wife loves me the way that Sean Payton loves Taysom Hill.
You know what? The challenge is, and no offense, Cody, I love you, but we do know from our very own Anita Marks that Sean Payton and Mike Westhoff, when he was there at special teams coach, the reason that Taysom Hill got elevated off the practice squad is because he was walking around the locker room naked.
I remember that story.
And so unless you got some stuff going on under those clothes, man, Taysom Hill apparently is like an Adonis walking around. So we'll see how that goes. Going on to our last game in the AFC. All right, we already talked about the Bills. We already talked about the Ravens. We are now going to talk about the Cleveland Browns going up against the reigning champs, the Kansas City Chiefs. We already know Trey Wingo's take on this. He told us earlier in the show, everything the Chiefs do well is something the Browns do poorly. I, Cody, am inclined to agree with our friend Trey. I don't think the Browns make it out of here. I do think the Chiefs make it to a third consecutive AFC Championship game, something Andy Reid is the only other coach to have done when he was in the NFC with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Chiefs, while they have not been at their peak for the last couple of weeks, they certainly haven't covered the spreads. They certainly haven't looked right. I think they were in need of a bye, and they got their bye. And no one for a long time, especially when Andy was in Philadelphia, there was not a better head coach in football coming out of a bye week than Andy Reid. And I think we're going to see that again here. I think the Chiefs are going to be rested. I think they're going to have ironed out the chemistry issues that were plaguing them in between the 20s on the field. And I think we're going to see the Chiefs win this game. I think we see it. I think we see about a 10-point win here for Kansas City. And while Kevin Stefanski is my coach of the year, I do think that they go home and Kansas City advances. What are your thoughts, Coach?
I don't know, man. Hey, first off, I just want to say I love Trey Wingo, man. Trey Wingo's got a lot of insight in all of his experience in sports and sports media. Thank you for tuning in, Trey. Brett, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be bold here, okay? I'm a big believer in the bye week blues. It has come back to haunt many teams, okay? And I remember this is almost on the anniversary where Joe Flacco and the Ravens marched into Denver after Denver had a first-round bye in the divisional game back in 2012, and they the Broncos. I'm going to reference something more close now. We take a look at last year. Lamar Jackson, MVP, the NFL's best offense at the time, the Baltimore Ravens. They had a first-round bye. They came in, and then the Tennessee Titans came in and smacked them in the mouth. For Cleveland, a team that has faced a shadow of not making it to the postseason for so long, that pressure is off their back now. They don't have that pressure anymore. Now they come in, having a week played, having that continuity. We talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the struggles that they had before the season ended. Now they didn't play week 17. None of the key starters did against the Chargers. But I go back to the Atlanta Falcons game where we saw the Falcons, I think, play really well. And I thought Patrick Mahomes didn't play as great. And one of the things that comes back to bite this team in the tail consistently is they have a tendency to get way too cute with some of their play calls and some of their designs. They try to get tricky, and it ends up biting them in the tail this season. Now, this is the perfect formula where I do feel like, and going back and watch some games against Kansas City this year in my film study, if teams could come out and establish the run and do that very, very well against them, and they can hit some of these passes, I think that Kansas City could be in a little bit of trouble. I think the Browns have the opportunity to play upset special here, and it's going to be the biggest upset of the entire sports season. And I think that the Cleveland Browns, weird enough, I know I'm going to get a lot of people disagreeing with me, but look, man, the loins are telling me, be bold here. I think Cleveland's got a legitimate chance to shock the Kansas City Chiefs. Which Chiefs team is going to show up, though? That's going to be the biggest key.
And we all know you never go against the loins.
Ever.
But I will say this, it is certainly very interesting. I mean, you bring up a lot of good points. And look, we know on any given Sunday, anything can happen. We'll have to see how it plays out. But we're going to go to our final game here, Cody. And this is going to be the Packers of Green Bay and the Rams of St. Louis. I'm sorry, Los Angeles, or wherever they're playing now. I believe that Aaron Rodgers is the 2020 or 21 that season MVP. I think this is your MVP this year. I think Aaron Rodgers under Matt LaFleur is having a career renaissance in terms of being a dynamic playmaker. Not just a guy who puts up numbers, but a guy who is making plays again. Something we hadn't seen him do in his last couple of years under McCarthy. He's been rejuvenated. I don't know if it's because specifically of Matt LaFleur and the system, or because they drafted Jordan Love and now he's like, getting his ass in gear. I don't know. But I'm a big fan of what Aaron Rodgers has done this year, so much so that he is my MVP. He, to me, is the most valuable quarterback in the league, all things considered. I believe the Packers beat the Los Angeles Rams, who I just don't think have the offense to keep pace with the Green Bay Packers. This is a battle of two best friends at head coach, and Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur. They are part of the QB collective, the Shanahan coaching tree. Every year, Cody, every offseason, Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan, Sean McVay, Kevin Stefanski, Matt LaFleur, they all get together on a ranch and they just sit there and talk football and come up with new offensive schemes. No two coaches know each other better than the two coaches in this game. So to me, it comes down to talent. I think Green Bay has more of it. I think Green Bay ends up in the NFC Championship game. What say you?
Well, I think this is going to be a tough one. We talk about the bye week blues. I wonder how it's really going to affect the Packers. Look, Aaron Rodgers is the best there is. And in my Pro Football Writers of America ballot, I actually voted Aaron Rodgers as the league MVP. I think if anybody votes different, I mean, you can make the argument about Patrick Mahomes. You can make a little bit of an argument about Josh Allen. But overall, his numbers that he's putting up, next level for his age, and obviously the team around him, a team that we've regarded and we've talked about the narrative. They need to surround him with more weapons. Could you imagine him with KC's weapons? We talk about that all the time. But Devontae Adams is going to have a tough matchup against Jalen Ramsey. Aaron Donald, despite the rib injury, he's going to play. Brandon Staley's done phenomenal as the first-year defensive coordinator down there for the Los Angeles Rams. It's one of the best offenses in the NFL right now, going against the best defense right now. Here's where I'm kind of torn. How are the Packers going to do? Because we saw earlier in the year when Aaron Rodgers played Tampa Bay down there in Tampa. Tampa was the number one defense at that point. And the last time these two teams played, it was a little bit of a shootout. It was a high-scoring game. There was a lot of penalties on the side of the Green Bay Packers in this game. Yeah. To me, it's going to be, can they capitalize on some big-time plays? Absolutely. I think, you can do that. How impactful is the Green Bay offense going to be? Look, if you're going to struggle a little bit, if Rodgers gets off to a little bit of a slow start, if the Packers find themselves trailing early on, I think it's going to be really hard for them to come back against this defense. I think it's going to be difficult. Rodgers can do it, though. When I look at the Los Angeles Rams, Jared Goff, I mean, he's obviously going to be the guy. His thumb was so swollen. I remember they showed it on the TV broadcast last week against Seattle. His left hand versus his right. He was looking at it. It was fat. It was ridiculous there. So for them, can they run the ball? Cam Akers, I think, has done a very phenomenal job in Los Angeles, but it's going to really boil down to which offense can get things going. And I don't think the LA Rams can afford a slow start offensively, and especially I think this Packers defense has the capability of being good, being very good. We've seen spurts of it this year. This is going to be a toss-up, to be honest with you, Brett. I really don't know which way I'm leaning, but I'm going to go with the MVP, and that's going to be Aaron Rodgers. I'm going to go with the Packers in this one, but it could go either way. Like I said, a month ago before the playoff picture was even unfolded for the Rams, before they were even in the playoffs, I said it here on PFN Weekly, if they make it into the playoffs, they're going to be one of the most dangerous teams in the NFC. And so far, we saw it last week against Seattle. I was very disappointed by Seattle's performance, to be honest with you. Obviously, they made some changes there and firing their offensive coordinator in Schottenheimer. But that's another discussion for another day. Now, they're playing Green Bay, and they're still a very dangerous football team. And they have a chance. Sean McVay has a chance to maybe get that bad taste of that Super Bowl hangover out of his mouth. If they can beat Green Bay, they can get to the NFC Championship. They've got a legitimate chance of maybe making it back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I'll say this too as we bring the show to a close here. We are, you mentioned that Aaron Donald is facing a rib injury. One of Aaron Donald's patented moves on that inside there is to pull the offensive lineman's arm and swim over. Making that swim move with a rib injury when you got to extend and get that torso extended can be a little bit painful. So we'll have to see how that impacts him. That to me is my game of the weekend. He is a gamer. He is a warrior.
He's the Terminator, man.
But that is the game that I'm most excited to see from a pure football perspective. I think we're going to see a lot of cool things there. Again, you got Chiefs, Browns, Bills, Ravens, and Saints, Buccaneers. What a weekend of football, Cody. Guys, if you missed any part of the show, go to our YouTube channel, Pro Football Network. Check the show out. Mark Schofield, what a fantastic guest. He broke down the youth movement in the AFC of the remaining quarterbacks there in the playoffs. Fantastic job by Mark. Very grateful to him and his time. If you missed League Rumblings last night, which was me and Benjamin Albright, who was giving us a lot of tidbits of information regarding head coaches, GMs, free agents, the whole nine, that's also on our YouTube channel. There was some information there about the Denver's GM that broke today that we brought up a little bit last night, in addition to what's going on in Atlanta with Rick Smith and a couple other things going on around the league. So go check that out too. Everything is on our YouTube channel, Pro Football Network. Make sure you subscribe. Cody and myself wish you all a happy and healthy week. Enjoy the weekend. It's going to be a good one. Have a good night, guys.